At the 24/7 gas station, she scanned his card. The billionaire saw his lost wife's necklace around her neck and froze. The fluorescent lights of Murphy's 24-hour gas station buzzed overhead like angry wasps, casting everything in that harsh, unforgiving glow that made even the youngest faces look tired. At 3:17 a.m. on a Tuesday, the place felt like the last outpost of civilization, which Nathaniel Carter supposed it might as well be. He stood at the counter, his expensive Italian leather shoes squeaking against the sticky linoleum floor, waiting for the night clerk to process his credit card. The woman behind the register moved with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd been doing this job far longer than she'd ever planned to. Her name tag read Clare, and despite the exhaustion etched around her eyes, she managed a polite smile. "Sorry about the delay, Mr. Carter," she said, glancing at his platinum American Express. "The system's been acting up all night." Nathaniel nodded absently, his mind already racing ahead to the board meeting he had in 5 hours. At 35, he'd built Carter Enterprises from the ashes of his personal tragedy into a billion-dollar real estate empire. Sleep was a luxury he couldn't afford, hadn't been able to afford for 8 years. If he was being honest with himself, the register finally beeped its approval, and Clare handed him back his card. "There you go. Drive safe out there." He took the card, already turning toward the door, when something made him freeze mid-step. Around Clare's neck, catching the harsh light like captured moonbeams, was a strand of pearls that made his blood turn to ice water in his veins. The necklace was impossible. It couldn't be here. Couldn't be real. Couldn't be anything but his exhausted mind playing the cruelest trick imaginable. But as he stared, transfixed, every detail burned itself into his retinas with perfect, devastating clarity. 12 perfectly matched Akoya pearls, each one flawless and luminous. The antique platinum clasp shaped like a delicate rose. And there, his breath caught in his throat, the tiny chip on the 7th pearl from the left. So small most people would never notice it. "Sir, are you all right?" Clare's voice seemed to come from very far away. The necklace had been in his family for 4 generations. His great-grandmother had worn it on her wedding day in 1923. His grandmother had treasured it through the Depression. His mother had passed it to Elena on their wedding day, tears streaming down her face as she fastened the clasp around his young bride's neck. "Your necklace," he managed to say, his voice coming out as barely more than a whisper. Clare's hand went instinctively to her throat, fingers touching the pearls protectively. "What about it? Where did you get it?" Something in his tone must have alarmed her because she took a small step back. It's been in my family for years." "Why?" That was impossible. The Carter family pearls had been destroyed 8 years ago. In the fire that took everything from him. The fire that killed Elena and their newborn daughter Sophia. He'd identified the melted remains of the clasp himself, had held the twisted metal in his hands while the insurance investigator took photographs. "Sir, you're really pale. Do you need to sit down?" Clare was looking at him with genuine concern now, and he realized he must look like he was about to collapse. Maybe he was. "I'm sorry," he said, forcing himself to take a step back. You look like someone I used to know." It wasn't entirely a lie. Clare had Elena's coloring, that rich chestnut hair, those warm brown eyes. But Elena had been 20 when she died. Just a girl, really. And Clare looked to be approaching 30. There was a steadiness to her, a groundedness that Elena, for all her sweetness, had never possessed. Clare's expression softened. "I get that sometimes. I guess I have one of those faces." She glanced at the clock on the wall behind her. "Are you sure you're okay to drive? There's coffee if you need it. Not great coffee, but it's caffeinated." Despite everything, Nathaniel found himself almost smiling. "Thank you, but I'll be fine." As he turned to leave, Clare called after him. "Mr. Carter." He paused, hand on the door. "I hope you find whatever it is you're looking for." The words hit him like a physical blow. For 8 years, he'd told himself he wasn't looking for anything anymore. He'd found his purpose in building his empire, in the ruthless pursuit of success that left no room for the past. But standing in this fluorescent-lit gas station at 3 a.m, staring at a necklace that shouldn't exist, he realized he'd been lying to himself all along. The drive back to his penthouse passed in a blur of city lights and half-formed thoughts. By the time he pulled into his private garage, his hands had stopped shaking, but his mind was racing faster than ever. In his study, surrounded by the awards and photos that chronicled his rise from grief-stricken widower to business mogul. Nathaniel pulled out the folder he kept locked in his desk drawer. He hadn't opened it in 3 years, but every document was exactly where he'd left it. Police reports, fire department findings, insurance claims, death certificates. Elena Marie Carter, aged 20, cause of death, smoke inhalation. Sophia Rose Carter, aged 3 weeks, cause of death, smoke inhalation. The fire had started at 2:30 a.m. in what used to be the guest wing of the family estate. Elena had been staying there since Sophia's birth, claiming the baby's room had better natural light. By the time the fire department arrived, that entire section of the house was engulfed in flames. They'd found Elena's body in the nursery, curled protectively around their daughter. The funeral had been closed. Casket. Nathaniel stared at the death certificates until the words blurred together. Then he reached for his phone and dialed a number he hadn't used in 2 years. Marcus, it's Nathaniel Carter. I know it's early, but I need you to run an investigation for me. Marcus Webb had been the best private investigator money could buy when Nathaniel first hired him to look into some suspicious business dealings 3 years ago. He was thorough, discreet, and completely unscrupulous when the price was right. What kind of investigation, Mr. Carter? Nathaniel looked out his floor-to-ceiling windows at the city spread below him like a glittering circuit board. Somewhere out there, a woman named Clare was probably heading home from her graveyard shift, the Carter family pearls gleaming against her throat. I want you to find out everything you can about a woman named Clare Donovan. She works at Murphy's gas station on 5th Street. Anything specific I should be looking for? Nathaniel closed his eyes, seeing Elena's face as clearly as if she were standing in front of him, 20 years old and laughing, her dark hair spilling over her shoulders as she modeled the pearl necklace in their bedroom mirror. I want to know about her family, her background. And Marcus, yeah, I want to know about any children she might have. Clare Donovan's alarm clock screamed at 6:30 a.m. Just 3 hours after she'd finally crawled into bed, she slapped it silent and lay there for exactly 30 seconds, allowing herself that brief moment of exhaustion before the day demanded everything she had to give. Mom. Grace's voice drifted through the thin apartment walls, sweet but tinged with the breathlessness that always made Claire's heart clench. Coming, baby girl. Claire dragged herself upright and padded barefoot to the kitchen of their cramped 2-bedroom apartment. Grace sat at the small table, already dressed in her school uniform, her inhaler positioned within easy reach like a tiny plastic lifeline. At 8 years old, Grace had the kind of ethereal beauty that made strangers stop and stare. Her pale blonde hair caught light like spun gold, and her blue eyes held a wisdom that seemed far too old for her small face. But it was the slight blue tinge around her lips that told the real story. The heart condition that made every day a careful balance between normal childhood activities and medical necessity. How are you feeling this morning, sweetheart? Claire asked, automatically checking Grace's color as she poured cereal into a bowl. Good, Mrs. Patterson said we're going to learn about butterflies today. Grace's voice carried that particular excitement that only 8-year-olds could muster for educational content. Claire smiled, pushing down the familiar worry that gnawed at her constantly. The doctors had been clear. Grace needed surgery, and soon, the septal defect in her heart was getting worse, and the medication could only do so much for so long. The problem was the surgery would cost more than Claire made in 3 years, even working her 3 jobs. That sounds amazing. Did you know some butterflies migrate thousands of miles? Really? That's so far. Grace's eyes lit up, temporarily forgetting the inhaler beside her breakfast, as Grace chattered about school. Claire's mind drifted back to the strange encounter at the gas station. The man, Mr. Carter, according to his credit card, had looked at her necklace like he'd seen a ghost. The way he'd stared, with such desperate intensity, had left her unsettled in a way she couldn't quite shake. The necklace had been with Grace when Claire found her 8 years ago. She'd been working late at the diner, covering someone's shift, when she came home to find a basket on her doorstep. Inside, wrapped in a soft pink blanket, was the most beautiful baby she'd ever seen, maybe 3 weeks old, with wisps of blonde hair and impossibly blue eyes. There had been a note, written in shaky handwriting. Please take care of her. Love her like your own. She deserves better than I can give her. And there had been the necklace, those perfect pearls that seemed far too valuable for someone desperate enough to abandon their baby. Claire had taken the child to the police, of course, but no missing baby reports matched Grace's description. After 3 months in the system, with no one coming forward to claim her, Claire had been approved for emergency foster care. The adoption had been finalized when Grace was 2. Claire had always known Grace wasn't an ordinary abandoned baby. The expensive blanket, the designer clothes she'd been wearing, and especially that necklace. It all pointed to a family with money, but as the years passed and no one came looking, Claire had let herself believe that maybe Grace was truly hers to keep. Last night's encounter had shattered that comfortable illusion. "Mom, you're burning the toast!" Claire snapped back to reality, quickly pulling the smoking bread from the toaster. "Sorry, baby. Just thinking about work." After dropping Grace at school with the usual medication reminders to her teacher, Claire drove across town to her second job at Sunnyside Cleaning Services. She had exactly 4 hours to clean 3 houses before her shift at the gas station started again. Mrs. Henderson's mansion was her first stop, as Claire scrubbed marble countertops that probably cost more than her car. She couldn't help but think about the disparity between this world and her own. These people bought pearl necklaces without thinking twice. While she was collecting change from couch cushions to pay for Grace's next doctor's appointment, her phone buzzed with a text from Dr. Martinez's office, reminding her about Grace's cardiac consultation next week. Claire's stomach dropped as she read the estimated costs for the upcoming tests. Even with the payment plan, she was looking at months of overtime just to cover the diagnostics, let alone any treatment. By the time she made it back to Murphy's gas station for her evening shift, Claire felt like she'd been running a marathon. Tom Murphy, the owner, was waiting for her with his usual gruff expression and a thermos of coffee that could strip paint. "You look like hell, Donovan." "Thanks, Tom. Always know just what to say to make a girl feel special." "I'm serious. You can't keep this pace up forever." "When's the last time you took a day off?" Claire couldn't remember. Between the gas station, the cleaning service, and her weekend shifts at the diner, she barely had time to sleep, let alone relax. But Grace's medical bills weren't going to pay themselves. "I'm fine, really." Tom studied her with the sharp eyes of someone who'd been watching people struggle for 60-plus years. "You know, if you ever need an advance on your paycheck." "Tom, I can't. It's not charity. You're the best night clerk I've had in 20 years. Consider it an investment in keeping you around." Claire felt tears prick her eyes. Kindness always hit her harder than cruelty. "Thank you, really, but we're managing." As the evening wore on, Claire found herself touching the pearl necklace obsessively. She'd never really questioned where it came from. It seemed almost sacrilegious to sell the one thing Grace's birth mother had left her. But now, with mounting medical bills and a stranger's intense reaction, she was beginning to wonder if she'd been naive. Around midnight, during a lull between customers, she pulled out her phone and did something she'd never done before. She researched the value of vintage pearl necklaces. What she found made her hands shake. Authentic antique Akoya pearl necklaces, especially those with platinum clasps, could be worth anywhere from $50,000 to over $100,000. More than enough for Grace's surgery, more than enough to change their lives completely, but they could also be worth something else entirely to the right person. The way that man had looked at her necklace, it wasn't the look of someone admiring beautiful jewelry. It was the look of someone recognizing something that belonged to them. Claire's shift ended at 6 a.m., and she drove home through the pre-dawn darkness with more questions than answers. As she quietly slipped into the apartment, she found Grace already awake, sitting by her bedroom window and looking out at the sunrise. "You're up early, sweetheart." "I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about those butterflies Mrs. Patterson told us about, the ones that travel so far to find their families." Claire's heart clenched. "What about them? Do you think they ever forget where they came from?" The innocent question hit Claire like a physical blow. Grace had never asked about her biological parents, had never seemed curious about the circumstances of her adoption. But now, at 8 years old, she was starting to wonder. "I think," Claire said carefully, settling beside Grace on the window seat, "that sometimes the family that chooses to love you is more important than the one you started with." Grace nodded solemnly, then leaned against Claire's shoulder. "I'm glad you chose me, Mom." "Oh, baby girl, you chose me too from the very first moment." As Grace drifted back to sleep, Claire stared out at the growing light and made a decision. Whatever the truth was about the necklace, about Grace's past, about the man who'd looked at them both like he'd seen ghosts, she needed to know. Grace deserved to know. But first, she needed to protect the daughter she'd raised, loved and fought for every single day for 8 years, whatever came next. Grace's safety and happiness would come first, even if it meant facing truths that might destroy the life they'd built together. Marcus Webb's office looked exactly like what it was, the workspace of a man who made his living digging up other people's secrets. The walls were lined with filing cabinets, surveillance equipment, and a collection of cameras that ranged from standard telephoto lenses to devices small enough to hide in a pen cap. Marcus himself was unremarkable by design. Average height, brown hair, the kind of face that people forgot 5 minutes after meeting him. "Clare Elizabeth Donovan," Marcus said, sliding a thick manila folder across his desk to Nathaniel. 28 years old, born in St. Mary's Hospital right here in the city. Parents died in a car accident when she was 16. Drunk driver hit them head-on coming home from her school play. Nathaniel opened the folder, his hands steadier than they'd been in days. The first photograph showed Clare at what looked like a high school graduation, smiling despite the sadness in her eyes. She looked impossibly young. "She's been on her own ever since," Marcus continued. "Finished high school while working part-time at a local diner. No college. Couldn't afford it. She's worked every job you can imagine. Waitressing, retail, house cleaning, you name it. Currently pulling 3 jobs to make ends meet." "What about the child?" Marcus's expression grew more serious. "That's where it gets interesting, Grace Donovan. Officially adopted 8 years ago when Clare was 20. But here's the thing. There's no record of Clare being pregnant. No hospital stays. No prenatal care. Nothing." Nathaniel's pulse quickened. "So where did the child come from?" According to the adoption records, Grace was found abandoned on Clare's doorstep when she was approximately 3 weeks old. Clare took her to the authorities, but when no one claimed her after the mandatory waiting period, Clare was approved for emergency foster care. The adoption was finalized 2 years later. The timeline hit Nathaniel like a sledgehammer. 3 weeks old. 8 years ago, it would put Grace's birth right around the time of the fire, right around when Sophia should have been born. Any medical records for the child? Marcus flipped through several pages. Grace has a congenital heart defect, ventricular septal defect. To be specific, she needs surgery soon. According to her cardiologist, Claire's been working herself to death trying to pay for it. Nathaniel studied a more recent photo of Grace, even in the grainy surveillance shot. The resemblance was unmistakable. The child had Elena's delicate bone structure, but those eyes, those were Carter eyes, the same unusual blue-gray that had marked his family for generations. "I need DNA," Nathaniel said quietly. "Already on it. Got samples from both Clare and the kid yesterday. Results should be back by Friday." "How did you—" Nathaniel stopped himself. He didn't want to know Marcus's methods. Across town, Catherine Carter was having her own difficult conversation. She sat in her perfectly appointed living room, crystal tumbler of bourbon in hand despite the early afternoon hour, staring at her phone like it might explode. Daniel Reeves, her partner in more crimes than she cared to count, paced her Persian rug like a caged animal. At 52, Daniel had the nervous energy of a man who'd spent decades looking over his shoulder. As the former chief financial officer of Carter Enterprises, he'd helped Catherine systematically embezzle nearly $12 million over the course of 5 years. "You're being paranoid, Catherine. There's no way Nathaniel could know anything. It's been 8 years. Then explain why he's suddenly having that woman investigated," Catherine snapped. "The private investigator has been watching her for 3 days. That's not a coincidence." Daniel stopped pacing. "What woman?" Catherine pulled up the photos on her phone. Surveillance shots Marcus had taken, which she'd obtained through a contact at his security company. "Clare Donovan. She works at some gas station downtown. Has a kid." When Daniel saw the photos, his face went white. "Jesus Christ, Catherine. That kid. Looks exactly like Elena." "I know." Catherine took a large gulp of bourbon. "The question is, how much does Nathaniel know?" 8 years ago, their plan had been flawless. Elena had discovered the embezzlement quite by accident, finding discrepancies in the quarterly reports while helping Nathaniel prepare for a board meeting. She'd been so young, so naive, she'd actually thought it was a mistake at first. Catherine remembered the conversation clearly. Elena standing in this very room, clutching printouts of bank statements, her voice shaking as she said, "Catherine, I think there might be a problem with the company accounts." The poison had been Daniel's idea. Something untraceable. Something that would mimic the effects of smoke inhalation. They'd needed Elena to appear dead long enough to get her out of the house before setting the fire. The plan was to make it look like a tragic accident. Young mother and baby killed in their sleep. But Elena had been stronger than they'd anticipated. She'd survived the poison, woken up during transport, and somehow escaped. Pregnant and disoriented, she'd disappeared into the city's underbelly before they could find her. They'd set the fire anyway, placing dental records and DNA samples they'd obtained from Elena's previous medical procedures. The closed casket funeral had been their idea, easier to explain away any discrepancies in the autopsy. "We should have looked harder for her," Daniel muttered. "We looked for months. She was 8 months pregnant, suffering from drug-induced amnesia, and had no money or identification. We assumed she died on the streets. Well, she didn't. And now her kid is walking around looking like a Carter family portrait." Catherine stood and walked to her window, looking out at the manicured grounds of her estate. Everything she'd built, the house, the cars, the lifestyle, had been purchased with stolen money. If Nathaniel uncovered the truth, she'd lose everything. Worse, she'd go to prison. "We need to find out exactly what Nathaniel knows," she said finally. "And then what?" Catherine turned back to Daniel, her expression cold. "Then we clean up our mess, permanently." Meanwhile, Claire was having the worst day of her cleaning career. She'd dropped and broken a Ming vase at the Patterson estate. Thankfully, they were understanding about it. Spilled bleach on Mrs. Henderson's imported Italian marble, not so understanding, and was now running 20 minutes late for her shift at the gas station. Grace's school had called during lunch to say she'd had a dizzy spell during recess. Nothing serious, but they'd had to call the nurse, and Claire had spent her entire break period on the phone with Dr. Martinez's office, trying to move up Grace's next appointment. The stress was getting to her. She'd barely slept in days, and every time she caught her reflection, she looked more like a ghost of herself. The pearl necklace felt heavier around her neck, like it was weighing her down with secrets she didn't understand. As she pulled into Murphy's parking lot, Claire noticed a black sedan parked across the street that hadn't been there that morning. Probably nothing, but after her encounter with Mr. Carter, she was noticing things she would have ignored before. Tom was waiting for her inside, his expression uncharacteristically serious. "Claire, we need to talk." Her heart sank. "If this is about me being late, it's not. Someone's been asking questions about you, about Grace." The blood drained from Claire's face. "What kind of questions?" "Private investigator came by this morning. Wanted to know about your work schedule, how long you've been here, whether you've ever mentioned the kid's father." Tom's weathered face was creased with worry. "I didn't tell him anything, but Claire, this isn't normal. People don't hire PS unless they're looking for something specific." Claire sank onto the stool behind the counter, her legs suddenly unable to support her. What did he look like? Professional? Expensive suit, nice car, the kind of guy who gets paid well to find things people don't want found. Through the window, Claire could see the black sedan was still there. As she watched, a man with a camera telephoto lens got out and started taking pictures of the gas station. "Tom, I need to call in sick tomorrow. Claire, please, I need to figure this out before..." She stopped herself before she could finish the thought. Before what? Before someone tried to take Grace away from her. Before the life she'd built came crashing down around her. "Whatever trouble you're in," Tom said quietly, "you don't have to handle it alone." But as Claire looked out at the man with the camera, she realized that wasn't true. Whatever was happening, whatever Mr. Carter wanted, whatever the truth was about Grace's past, she was very much alone. And Grace's life might depend on how well she could protect secrets she was only just beginning to understand. The DNA results arrived on a Thursday morning that started like any other, with Grace coughing through breakfast, and Claire calculating how many extra shifts she'd need to cover the latest medical bills. Nathaniel was in his office, staring at the sealed envelope Marcus had delivered. When his hands began to shake, he'd built an empire on calculated risks, had negotiated billion-dollar deals without breaking a sweat. But this single piece of paper could destroy everything he thought he knew about his life. The envelope tore open raggedly, and Nathaniel forced himself to read slowly, methodically, even as his world tilted off its axis. DNA analysis report, probability of paternity, 97%. Grace Donovan was his daughter. Nathaniel's legs gave out, and he collapsed into his chair. The report fluttering to the floor, Sophia, his baby girl who'd supposedly died in his arms 8 years ago, was alive. She was alive and living in a rundown apartment with a woman who had no idea she was raising a billionaire's child. But if Grace was alive, then where was Elena? His intercom buzzed. "Mr. Carter, Marcus Webb is here to see you." "Send him in." Marcus entered carrying another folder, his expression grim. "You read the DNA results." "She's mine." The words came out as barely a whisper. "There's more, Nathaniel. A lot more. And you're not going to like any of it." Marcus opened the new folder, revealing bank statements, medical records, and surveillance photos that made Nathaniel's blood run cold. I dug deeper into the fire investigation, started asking questions about who had access to the house, who knew Elena's routines, who would benefit from your wife's death. "What did you find?" "Your sister-in-law Catherine has been living way above her means for the past 8 years. We're talking about a lifestyle that costs 3 times her official salary. And Daniel Reeves, your former CFO, he's been making regular deposits to offshore accounts that don't match any legitimate income source." Nathaniel studied the financial records, his business mind automatically calculating the discrepancies. "How much?" "Best estimate, 12 million, maybe more. They've been siphoning money from Carter Enterprises for years." The pieces clicked together with horrifying clarity. "Elena found out?" "That's my theory. Your wife discovered the embezzlement, so they killed her to keep her quiet. Except," Marcus pulled out another set of documents. "The autopsy report on your wife shows traces of a paralytic agent in her system, something that would make her appear dead while keeping her organs functioning." Nathaniel felt the room spinning around him. "You're telling me they buried Elena alive?" "I'm telling you they tried to, but Elena was stronger than they expected, according to the medical examiner's notes, which I had to pay a substantial bribe to see. The amount of paralytic in her system should have been fatal. The fact that it wasn't suggests she had an unusual resistance to the drug. So she survived, but then where?" Nathaniel stopped, the final horrifying piece falling into place. "They sold her." Marcus nodded grimly. "That's the only explanation that makes sense. Elena woke up during transport, probably disoriented and terrified. 8 months pregnant, no memory of who she was or how she got there. Perfect victim for human trafficking." The rage that filled Nathaniel was unlike anything he'd ever experienced. It was white-hot and consuming, threatening to burn away everything rational he had left. Catherine and Daniel hadn't just stolen his money. They'd stolen his wife, his daughter, 8 years of their lives together. "I want them destroyed," he said quietly. "Nathaniel, you need to think about this carefully. If we move too fast." "I want them destroyed," Nathaniel repeated, his voice carrying the cold finality of a man who'd built an empire on the ruins of his grief. "But first, I want Elena found, across town." Claire was having her own revelation. She'd taken the day off from her cleaning jobs to spend time with Grace, who'd had another dizzy spell at school. They were sitting in Dr. Martinez's waiting room when Grace pointed to a magazine cover featuring a medical story about separated twins. "Mom, do you think my real parents ever think about me?" The question hit Claire like a physical blow. In 8 years, Grace had never asked about her biological family. Claire had always assumed the adoption had been so early that Grace wouldn't even remember being with anyone else. "What makes you ask that, sweetheart?" Grace shrugged, swinging her legs from the too-tall chair. "Jenny at school said adopted kids always wonder about their real families. She said maybe my parents gave me away because something was wrong with me." "Grace, look at me." Claire knelt in front of her daughter, taking her small hands. "Nothing is wrong with you. You have a heart condition, but that doesn't make you broken. And whoever your biological parents were, I guarantee they loved you. Sometimes loving someone means making sure they're safe, even if it means you can't be together. But why didn't they keep me safe themselves?" It was such a heartbreakingly innocent question. Claire had always told Grace that her birth mother was very young and couldn't take care of a baby, but now she wondered if that had been naive. The expensive clothes Grace had been wearing, the valuable necklace, those didn't suggest a teenage mother in crisis. "I don't know, baby girl, but I know they made sure you ended up with someone who would love you with everything they had." That afternoon, Claire made a decision she'd been avoiding for 8 years. She called the adoption agency. "Mrs. Donovan, I remember your case," said Mrs. Peterson, the social worker who'd handled Grace's adoption. "Is everything all right? Grace has been asking questions about her biological family. I was wondering if you could tell me anything more about the circumstances when she was found." There was a pause. "I'm limited in what I can share, but there were some unusual aspects to Grace's case." "What kind of unusual?" "The police report mentioned that the baby was found with some very expensive items. Designer clothes, a valuable necklace. It suggested that whoever left her wasn't destitute. We always wondered if there might have been some kind of family crisis, maybe domestic violence or threats that forced the mother to give up the child for safety reasons." Claire's grip tightened on the phone. "Did anyone ever come looking for her?" "Not officially, but..." Mrs. Peterson lowered her voice. "About 6 months after the adoption was finalized, we had someone calling regularly, asking about abandoned babies from that time period. They never gave a name, but it was a woman. She sounded desperate." The phone call ended with more questions than answers. But one thing was clear. Grace's story was more complicated than Claire had ever imagined. And with private investigators asking questions and mysterious men recognizing her necklace, those complications were catching up with them fast. That evening, as Claire tucked Grace into bed, her daughter looked up with those impossibly blue eyes and said, "Mom, if my real family came back, would you give me to them?" Claire's heart shattered. "Grace, you are my real family. You're my daughter in every way that matters. No one is going to take you away from me." But even as she said the words, Claire wasn't sure she could keep that promise, because somewhere out there, someone was looking for Grace. And judging by the private investigators and the expensive necklace, that someone had resources Claire couldn't even imagine. Later that night, after Grace was asleep, Claire sat at her kitchen table and Googled Carter Enterprises, Nathaniel Carter. What she found made her blood run cold. Nathaniel Carter's wife and infant daughter had died in a house fire 8 years ago. The news articles showed photos of a beautiful young woman with dark hair and a baby who would have been exactly Grace's age. The woman's name was Elena Carter, and in every single photo, she was wearing the exact same pearl necklace that Grace had been found with. Claire's hands were shaking as she reached for her phone. She didn't know what was happening, but she knew Grace was in danger, and for the first time in 8 years, she wasn't sure love would be enough to protect her daughter from the truth. The call came at 2:47 a.m., piercing through Nathaniel's restless sleep like a knife through silk. He'd been dreaming of Elena again. Not the broken memories of their last night together, but earlier times when she'd laugh at his terrible jokes and steal bites of his breakfast when she thought he wasn't looking. "Mr. Carter," the voice was unfamiliar, professional. "This is Dr. Sarah Chen at St. Mary's Emergency Department. We have Claire Donovan here, and your business card was in her wallet as an emergency contact." Nathaniel shot upright, his heart hammering against his ribs. "What happened? Is she..." "She's stable, but she's been shot. The bullet hit her shoulder, missed the major arteries. She's asking for you, sir. Says it's about her daughter." Nathaniel was dressed and in his car within minutes, racing through empty city streets with a single, terrifying thought echoing in his mind. Catherine had found them. The emergency room at St. Mary's was a controlled chaos of beeping monitors and hurried conversations. Nathaniel found Dr. Chen at the nurse's station, a petite woman with kind eyes and blood-stained scrubs. "Mr. Carter, Ms. Donovan is in room 7. She's heavily sedated, but she's been asking for you constantly. What about Grace, her daughter? Where is she? The little girl is here too. She wasn't injured, but she's pretty shaken up. Child Services is with her now." "But," Dr. Chen lowered her voice, "the child has a serious heart condition. The stress of tonight's events has exacerbated her symptoms. We need to run some tests, but her mother hasn't given consent yet." Nathaniel's jaw tightened. "I'll talk to Claire." Room 7 was dimly lit, machines monitoring Claire's vital signs with soft electronic whispers. She looked impossibly fragile against the white hospital sheets, her face pale except for the dark circles under her eyes. But when she saw Nathaniel, she struggled to sit up. "You came." "Of course I came." Nathaniel pulled a chair close to her bed. "Claire, what happened?" "They tried to take Grace." Her voice was hoarse, barely above a whisper. "2 men in a black car. They followed us home from the grocery store, cornered us in the parking lot of our apartment building. Nathaniel felt that familiar rage building in his chest. Did they say what they wanted? They knew about the necklace, said their boss wanted to discuss Grace's future. Claire's eyes filled with tears. I tried to run, but one of them grabbed Grace. When I fought back, the other one pulled a gun. How did you get away? Mrs. Rodriguez from 3B. She heard Grace screaming and came out with her husband's baseball bat, started hitting the car. Screaming in Spanish, the men got spooked and drove off, but not before. Claire touched her bandaged shoulder gingerly. Nathaniel reached for her uninjured hand. Claire, I need to tell you something. About Grace. About the necklace. About who I really am. I know who you are. Claire's voice was steady despite her tears. I looked you up after you came to the gas station. Your wife, Elena. She had the same necklace in all the photos. And Grace. She paused, studying Nathaniel's face. Grace has your eyes. The simple statement hit him harder than any revelation could have. She's my daughter. I figured the question is, what are you going to do about it? Before Nathaniel could answer, Dr. Chen knocked and entered. Mrs. Donovan, we need to discuss your daughter's condition. Her heart rate is elevated, and she's showing signs of distress. We'd like to run some tests, but do whatever you need to do, Claire said immediately. Cost doesn't matter. Actually, Nathaniel interjected, I'll be handling all medical expenses. Dr. Chen, please put Grace Donovan on my insurance immediately and make sure she gets the best cardiac care available. Dr. Chen looked between them, clearly sensing undercurrent she didn't understand. I'll need some paperwork. My assistant will handle everything. In the meantime, what does Grace need right now? Blood work, an echocardiogram, possibly a cardiac catheterization if the echo shows deterioration. And frankly, she needs surgery soon. Her septal defect is getting worse. Nathaniel stood. Then schedule the surgery, tonight, if necessary. Mr. Carter, pediatric cardiac surgery isn't something we do on emergency scheduling unless the family has the resources to make it happen immediately. Nathaniel's voice carried the authority of a man accustomed to making impossible things possible. Dr. Chen, money is not an object. Grace gets whatever she needs, whenever she needs it. After Dr. Chen left to make arrangements, Claire stared at Nathaniel with a mixture of gratitude and fear. Why are you doing this? Because she's my daughter. Because for 8 years, I thought she was dead. Nathaniel sat back down, his voice breaking slightly. Because someone tried to kill her mother tonight, and I won't let them try again. There's something else, isn't there? This isn't just about the necklace. Nathaniel told her everything. About Catherine and Daniel's embezzlement. About Elena's supposed death. About the mounting evidence that his wife had been sold into human trafficking. With each revelation, Claire's face grew paler. So Elena might still be alive. I have people looking. But Claire, you and Grace are in immediate danger. Catherine knows Grace exists now, and she'll do anything to keep her secrets buried. I won't let anyone hurt her. Claire's voice was fierce despite her weakened state. Grace is my daughter. I don't care about DNA or blood relations. I've raised her, loved her, sacrificed everything for her, and you'll keep doing that. But now you won't be doing it alone. 2 hours later, the blood test results confirmed what Nathaniel already knew in his heart. The lab technician who drew the samples looked puzzled as she compared the results. Dr. Chen, this is unusual. The blood work shows that Mr. Carter is compatible for direct transfusion with the child. Perfect match. Actually, I've never seen genetic markers align so precisely unless they're parent and child. Dr. Chen finished. She looked at Nathaniel with new understanding. You're Grace's biological father. The confirmation should have felt triumphant, but all Nathaniel felt was a bone-deep exhaustion. 8 years of grief, of building walls around his heart, of believing love only led to loss. And now he had a daughter who didn't even know his name. Can I see her? Grace was in the pediatric wing, curled up in a hospital bed that made her look impossibly small. She was awake, but staring at the ceiling, her blue eyes bright with unshed tears. Hi there, Nathaniel said softly from the doorway. I'm a friend of your mom's. Is it okay if I come in? Grace turned to look at him, and Nathaniel's breath caught. It was like looking at Elena's eyes in his own face. a perfect blend of both their features that made his chest tight with longing and loss. "Are you the man who's going to help my mom?" "Yes, and I'm going to help you too. Do you know why those bad men wanted to hurt us?" Nathaniel sat in the chair beside her bed, choosing his words carefully. Sometimes adults make very bad choices, and innocent people get hurt. But I promise you, Grace, no one is going to hurt you or your mom again. Promise. I promise. Grace studied his face with the serious intensity that only children possessed. "You have sad eyes, like my mom sometimes." "Yeah, I guess I do. My mom says sad eyes mean you've lost someone important." Nathaniel felt tears threatening. "Your mom is very wise. Did you lose someone important?" The question was so innocent, so direct, that Nathaniel almost couldn't answer. "Yes, but maybe I'm about to find them again." Later that night, as Grace finally slept and Clare recovered from surgery, Nathaniel made a call that would change everything. "Marcus, I want Catherine and Daniel under 24-hour surveillance. And Marcus, start looking for Elena in every homeless shelter, every hospital, every place a woman with severe trauma and amnesia might end up. She's alive, and I'm going to find her." Because now he had more than just himself to fight for. He had a daughter who deserved to know her mother, and a woman who'd sacrificed everything to keep that daughter safe. The war Catherine had started 8 years ago was about to end, and this time, Nathaniel intended to win. The Riverside Women's Shelter smelled like industrial disinfectant and desperation. Nathaniel had visited 14 similar facilities over the past 3 days, showing Elena's photograph to overworked social workers and hollow-eyed residents who lived in the margins of society. Each "no" felt like another nail in a coffin he wasn't ready to build. "I'm sorry, but she doesn't look familiar," said Janet Morrison, the shelter director, handing back the 8-year-old wedding photo. "But you have to understand, Mr. Carter. Women come and go here. Some don't stay long enough for us to learn their names." Nathaniel studied the rows of cots visible through the office window. Women of all ages sat or lay on thin mattresses, their possessions contained in plastic bags and worn backpacks. The defeated posture of long-term homelessness was written in their hunched shoulders and downcast eyes. What about someone who might not remember her real name? Someone with memory problems, maybe trauma-related. Janet's expression softened. "Mr. Carter, half the women here have some form of PTSD or dissociative disorder. Trauma does terrible things to memory, but..." She paused, considering. "There is someone. Goes by Ivy. Been coming here on and off for years. Never stays more than a few nights at a time. She has severe amnesia. Can't remember anything before about 8 years ago." Nathaniel's heart stopped. "Where is she now?" "I haven't seen her in weeks. Ivy's difficult to help. She doesn't trust easily, and she disappears whenever anyone tries to get too close. The last time she was here, she was in pretty bad shape. Malnourished, suffering from exposure. Can you describe her?" Janet pulled out a worn notebook. "Late 20s, maybe early 30s, brown hair, though it's usually dirty and matted. Thin, probably underweight. She has some scarring on her face and hands. Old injuries like she'd been in an accident or..." Janet trailed off, studying Nathaniel's face. "Who exactly are you looking for, Mr. Carter?" "My wife. She disappeared 8 years ago. I thought she was dead." The downtown mission was Nathaniel's 15th stop, a converted warehouse that served meals to anyone who needed them. Brother Michael, a weathered man in his 60s, listened patiently as Nathaniel explained his search. "Ivy," Brother Michael said immediately. "Yeah, I know her. Comes in for meals sometimes, but she's skittish. Won't let anyone get too close. Always sits by the exit. She has these episodes. Flashbacks, maybe. Sometimes she'll be eating, and suddenly she'll start crying and run out." "When did you last see her?" 3, maybe 4 days ago. "But Mr. Carter, if this woman is your wife..." Brother Michael's voice was gentle but firm. "The person you're looking for may not be the person you remember. 8 years on the streets changes people in ways that can't always be undone." That afternoon, Nathaniel found himself walking through Riverside Park, the area where several shelter workers had mentioned seeing Ivy. The park had once been a showcase of the city's revitalization efforts, but budget cuts had left it partially abandoned. Homeless camps dotted the wooded areas, and makeshift shelters hid among the overgrown bushes. He was about to give up when he saw her. She was sitting on a bench near the old playground, feeding pigeons from a paper bag, even from a distance, even with her hair hanging in dirty tangles around her face, even with the obvious weight loss and the way she held herself like a wounded animal. He knew. Elena. Nathaniel's legs nearly gave out after 8 years of grief, of building walls around the possibility of hope. Seeing her alive was like being struck by lightning. She was real. She was breathing. She was 20 feet away from him. But as he stepped closer, he realized Brother Michael had been right. This wasn't the Elena he remembered. Gone was the confident young woman who'd teased him about his terrible cooking and fallen asleep reading business reports in bed. This Elena, Ivy, was a broken shell, her movements quick and nervous, her eyes constantly scanning for threats. "Elena," he said softly. She looked up, and Nathaniel's heart shattered completely. Her face, once round and glowing with youth, was gaunt and marked by a scar that ran from her left temple to her jaw. But it was her eyes that destroyed him. They were empty, looking at him without even a flicker of recognition. "Do I know you?" Her voice was hoarse, like she didn't use it often. "My name is Nathaniel. I've been looking for you." Ivy's entire body tensed, and she clutched her bag of birdseed like a weapon. "I don't know any Nathaniel. Leave me alone." "Elena, please. You're my wife. We were married. We have a daughter. My name is Ivy." The words came out as a panicked shout, and she bolted from the bench, running toward the tree line with surprising speed. Nathaniel started to follow, then forced himself to stop. Chasing her would only terrify her more. Instead, he sat on the bench she'd vacated, his hands shaking as the reality of the situation hit him. Elena was alive, but she was lost. The woman he'd loved, who'd laughed at his jokes and made him want to be better than he was. That woman was buried somewhere inside this frightened, damaged stranger. Meanwhile, across town, Grace was having the best day she'd had in months. The hospital had moved her to a private room with a view of the city, and Nathaniel had arranged for a parade of distractions. Art supplies, books, even a therapy dog named Buster who made her laugh until her sides hurt. Claire watched from her wheelchair, still recovering from her surgery, but insisting on staying close to Grace. She'd been trying to process everything Nathaniel had told her, but the reality kept slipping away like water through her fingers. "Mom, look." Grace held up a drawing she'd been working on, a family portrait with 3 stick figures. "That's you. That's me, and that's Mr. Nathaniel." Claire's throat tightened. "It's beautiful, sweetheart. He said he's going to help fix my heart, and he has really sad eyes like you do sometimes when you think I'm not looking. Grace, honey, we need to talk about Mr. Nathaniel. I know he's my dad." The simple statement hit Claire like a physical blow. "How do you—" "He has the same eyes as me, and when he looks at me, he gets this expression like you do, like he loves me, but it makes him sad." Grace set down her crayon and looked at Claire with that unnervingly mature expression she sometimes wore. "Are you mad that I have another parent?" Claire felt tears burning behind her eyes. "Oh, baby girl, I'm not mad. I'm scared." "Of what?" "Of losing you." Grace wheeled her art table aside and reached for Claire's hand. "Mom, you're never going to lose me. You're my real mom, mister. Nathaniel might be my dad, but you're the one who took care of me when I was sick, who read me stories, who taught me how to be brave." Claire was crying openly now. "You're 8 years old. You shouldn't have to comfort adults." "Mrs. Patterson says wisdom doesn't have an age limit." At that moment, Nathaniel appeared in the doorway, looking haggard and defeated. Grace immediately picked up on his mood. "Did something bad happen?" Nathaniel sat heavily in the visitor's chair. "I found her. I found Elena." Claire's breath caught. "Grace's birth mother. She's alive, but she doesn't remember anything. 8 years on the streets. Severe trauma. Complete amnesia. She calls herself Ivy now. And when I tried to talk to her," Nathaniel's voice broke. "She ran away from me." Grace studied his face with that same intense focus she'd used when they first met. "Is she sick like me? In a different way?" "Yes." "Then we have to help her get better. Just like you're helping me." The innocence of the statement, the absolute certainty that love could fix anything, made both adults fall silent. Here was an 8-year-old child, facing heart surgery, and the revelation that her entire world was more complicated than she'd ever imagined. And her first instinct was to help someone else. "It's not that simple, Grace," Nathaniel said gently. Why not? If she's sick and scared, she needs people who love her to help her feel safe again. Grace looked between Nathaniel and Claire. That's what families do, right? Later that evening, after Grace had fallen asleep, Claire and Nathaniel sat in the hospital cafeteria, drinking terrible coffee and trying to figure out how to move forward. She's right, you know, Claire said suddenly. Grace, about families helping each other. Claire, you don't understand, Elena. Ivy. She's severely damaged. She might never remember us, might never be the person she was before, but she's still Grace's mother, and she's still the woman you loved. Nathaniel stared into his coffee cup. What if trying to help her just makes things worse? What if I push too hard and she disappears again? Then we'll find another way. We'll be patient, we'll be careful, and we'll keep trying. Claire reached across the table and touched his hand. Nathaniel, Grace has spent her whole life fighting for every breath. If she can face heart surgery with a smile, we can figure out how to help a broken woman remember how to trust again. Outside, Catherine Carter was making final preparations for a solution that would eliminate all her problems at once if Nathaniel wanted to play detective. If that woman wanted to keep secrets that threatened everything Catherine had built, then it was time to end this game permanently. The pieces were in motion, and by tomorrow night, Grace Donovan would be nothing more than another tragic headline. The coffee shop on 5th Street wasn't the kind of place Nathaniel Carter would normally frequent. The vinyl seats were cracked, the fluorescent lighting flickered intermittently, and the coffee tasted like it had been brewing since the Clinton administration. But it was exactly the kind of anonymous, unremarkable place where someone like Ivy might feel safe. Nathaniel had been coming here every morning for a week, ordering the same black coffee and sitting at the same corner table, hoping Elena would wander in. Marcus had identified it as one of the places she visited occasionally, drawn by their policy of not asking questions about customers who paid for their meals in small change. On Thursday morning, his patience was rewarded. She slipped through the door like a shadow, her movements quick and economical. 8 years of living on the streets had taught her to be invisible, to take up as little space as possible. She ordered just coffee, black, no sugar, and chose a table near the exit, positioning herself so she could see both the entrance and the back door. Nathaniel forced himself to wait 10 minutes before approaching. When he finally stood up, Ivy's head snapped toward him, her body tensing like a rabbit sensing a predator. "May I sit?" he asked, gesturing to the empty chair across from her. "It's a free country." Her voice was flat. Guarded, Nathaniel sat slowly, keeping his movements deliberate and non-threatening. "I brought something I thought you might want to see." He pulled out a small photo album, the kind with clear plastic sleeves. Inside were pictures he'd printed from his phone, recent photos of Grace in the hospital, laughing with the therapy dog, concentrating on her artwork, sleeping peacefully in her hospital bed. "This is Grace," he said, sliding the album across the table. "She's 8 years old." Ivy's hands trembled as she touched the album, but she didn't open it. "Why are you showing me pictures of some kid?" "Because she's your daughter." The words hit Ivy like a physical blow. She pushed the album back toward him, shaking her head violently. No, I don't have any children. I would remember. You gave birth to her 8 years ago. You were in captivity, suffering from drug-induced amnesia. When you escaped, you brought her to someone you trusted to keep her safe." Ivy stood abruptly, knocking over her coffee cup. The dark liquid spread across the table, seeping into the photo album. "You're lying. I don't know what game you're playing, but..." "Her favorite color is purple," Nathaniel continued, his voice gentle but insistent. "She draws pictures of butterflies when she's nervous. She has a heart condition that requires surgery, and she's the bravest person I've ever met." Something in Ivy's expression shifted, a flicker of uncertainty replacing the flat denial. She sat back down slowly, staring at the coffee-stained album. "I don't remember any of this." "I know, but maybe you could try to remember. Grace needs her mother." With shaking hands, Ivy opened the album. The first photograph showed Grace in her hospital bed, holding up one of her drawings. It was a picture of a woman with brown hair holding a baby, both of them surrounded by what looked like butterflies. Ivy stared at the drawing for a long time, her breathing becoming rapid and shallow. Sometimes I dream about butterflies and a baby crying, but it's not real. Dreams aren't real." Sometimes dreams are memories trying to surface. Ivy flipped through more photos, her expression growing more agitated with each image. When she reached a picture of Grace wearing the pearl necklace, a photo Nathaniel had taken just yesterday when Grace insisted on trying it on, Ivy let out a sound that was part gasp, part sob. Where did she get this? Her finger traced the pearls through the plastic. She's had it since she was a baby, since someone left it with her. I know this necklace. The words came out as a whisper. I dream about it sometimes, heavy against my neck. Cold pearls. But in the dreams, there's blood on them. Nathaniel's heart raced. What else do you remember? Pain, screaming, fire. Ivy's voice was getting higher, more panicked, and a man with kind eyes who said he loved me. But then everything went dark. She was hyperventilating now, her hands clutching the edges of the table. Nathaniel reached toward her, but she flinched away violently. Don't touch me. Nobody touches me. Other customers were starting to stare. Nathaniel pulled out his phone and speed-dialed Clare, who was back at the hospital with Grace. Clare, I'm with Elena. I need you to bring Grace to Memorial Park, the playground near the south entrance. And Clare, bring the necklace. Meanwhile, Catherine Carter was pacing her living room like a caged animal, her phone pressed to her ear as she spoke in harsh whispers to someone on the other end. I don't care what it costs. The child needs to disappear, and it needs to look like an accident. Hospital security is tight, but there are windows of opportunity during shift changes. Daniel sat in the corner, sweating despite the air conditioning. Catherine, maybe we should just run. Take the money and disappear before... Before what, Daniel? Before Nathaniel figures out the rest of it. Before that homeless woman remembers who she really is. Catherine's laugh was sharp and bitter. We're past the point of running. This ends tonight. She hung up the phone and turned to Daniel. Our contact says there's a 30-minute window at 9 p.m. when they transfer patients between wings. If Grace has an allergic reaction to her medication during that time. Jesus. Catherine, she's just a kid. She's a loose end, and loose ends get people like us life sentences. At Memorial Park, Claire pushed Grace's wheelchair along the paved path while Nathaniel walked beside them, constantly scanning their surroundings for any sign of Ivy. Grace wore the pearl necklace over her hospital gown, the gems catching the afternoon sunlight. Are you sure she'll come? Claire asked. She's curious about the necklace, and despite her fear, I think part of her wants to remember. They found Ivy sitting on a bench near the playground, watching children play with an expression of profound longing. When she saw them approaching, her entire body went rigid. This is Grace, Nathaniel said simply. Grace looked up at Ivy with those startling blue eyes. Carter, family eyes, and smiled. Hi, are you the lady from my dreams? Ivy's breath caught. What dreams? I dream about a lady with brown hair who sings to me. She's always sad, but she loves me very much. Grace's voice was matter of fact, the way children spoke about things adults found impossible to accept. Are you my first mother? The question hung in the air like a prayer. Ivy stared at Grace for a long moment, taking in every detail. The delicate bone structure, the way she held her head, the intelligence in her eyes. I can't. Ivy's voice broke. Grace reached up and touched the pearl necklace around her throat. This is yours, isn't it? I've always known it didn't really belong to me. With trembling fingers, Grace unclasped the necklace and held it out to Ivy. Maybe if you wear it, you'll remember. Ivy stared at the pearls like they might bite her, but slowly, cautiously, she reached out and took them. The moment the pearls touched her skin, her eyes rolled back and she collapsed. The memories hit her like a tsunami, fragmented images of pain and terror, but also flashes of joy, a positive pregnancy test. Nathaniel's hands on her swollen belly, the first time she felt the baby kick, labor pains in a dark, horrible place, a tiny, perfect face, blue eyes blinking up at her, running through the night, the baby crying against her chest, leaving her most precious possession with the one person she trusted completely. When Ivy's eyes opened, she was lying on the grass with Nathaniel, Clare, and Grace hovering over her, but for the first time in 8 years, there was recognition in her gaze. Nathaniel, her voice was barely a whisper. I'm here, Elena. I'm here. Our baby. I saved our baby. You did. You saved her. Elena struggled to sit up, her eyes fixed on Grace with wonder and heartbreak. She's so beautiful, so perfect. Tears streamed down her face. I'm sorry I forgot you, baby girl. I'm so sorry. Grace reached out and touched Elena's scarred cheek with infinite gentleness. It's okay, First Mother. You're sick, but you're going to get better now. We're going to help you. As the three of them sat in the grass, a broken family slowly beginning to heal. None of them noticed the black sedan parked across the street, or the man inside taking photographs with a telephoto lens. Catherine's cleanup crew was already in motion. The call came at 7:43 p.m., just as Nathaniel was helping Elena settle into the hotel room he'd secured for her near the hospital. Her memory was returning in painful fragments, flashes of their wedding day mixed with images of captivity that made her cry out in her sleep. "We have your daughter." The voice was electronically distorted, but Nathaniel recognized the cold calculation behind it. "Catherine, where is she?" "The old Riverside Industrial Complex, Warehouse 7. Come alone. Bring 50 million in bearer bonds, and maybe the kid lives to see morning. If you hurt her, you're in no position to make threats, Nathaniel. You have 2 hours. The line went dead. Nathaniel's hands were shaking as he called Marcus, then Claire, then the hospital. The news was worse than he'd feared. Grace had been taken during the shift change. Exactly as Catherine had planned, the security footage showed 2 men in medical scrubs wheeling her out in a transport wheelchair, her unconscious form hidden under hospital blankets. "I'm coming with you," Elena said, overhearing his frantic phone calls. Her voice was stronger than it had been since her memories returned, fueled by maternal fury. "Elena, you're not ready for this. You've been through enough. They took my daughter." The words came out like steel. "The same people who stole 8 years of my life, who made me forget my own child. They're not getting away with this. It's too dangerous." Elena's eyes blazed with a fire Nathaniel remembered from their early days together. "Nathaniel, I've survived 8 years of hell. I've lived in that warehouse before. They kept me there for months. I know every entrance, every hiding spot, every way in and out." Nathaniel stared at her. "You remember the warehouse?" "Bits and pieces. Enough to know that Catherine chose it specifically to mess with my head." Elena pulled on the jacket Clare had brought her, her movements quick and determined. "She wants me to remember what she did to me there. Well, congratulations, Catherine. I remember, and now I'm going to make sure she regrets every second of it." The Riverside Industrial Complex had been abandoned for 15 years. A sprawling monument to the city's manufacturing past, Warehouse 7 sat at the far end of the complex, its broken windows and rusted exterior making it look like the last place anyone would think to look for a kidnapped child, which was exactly the point. Nathaniel and Elena approached through the maze of abandoned buildings, using the cover of darkness and Elena's returning memories of the layout. Marcus and his team were positioned around the perimeter, but Nathaniel had been explicit. No one moved until Grace was safe. "There," Elena whispered, pointing to a loading dock on the building's north side. "That's how they brought me in originally. There's a service tunnel that connects to the main floor." As they moved closer, Elena's breathing became labored, her newly recovered memories warring with the trauma responses that had kept her alive on the streets. "I can see myself, chained to a pipe in the basement, pregnant, scared, not understanding why this was happening. We can find another way in." "No." Elena's voice was firm. "I need to face this. Grace needs me to face this." The service tunnel was narrow and dark. Filled with the smell of rust and decay, Elena led the way, her street-honed instincts navigating the obstacles with surprising grace. As they emerged into the main warehouse floor, they could hear voices echoing from the far end of the cavernous space. Catherine stood in a circle of battery-powered lanterns, her expensive clothes incongruous in the industrial setting. Grace was tied to a chair 20 feet away, conscious but groggy from whatever they'd used to sedate her, even from a distance. Nathaniel could see her lips had that bluish tinge that meant her heart was struggling. "You're late," Catherine called out as Nathaniel and Elena stepped into the light. "And you brought company. How touching. The reunited family, together for their final performance." Daniel Reeves stood behind Catherine, nervously clutching a gun like he'd never held one before. His face was pale and sweaty, and he kept glancing toward the shadows as if expecting police to emerge at any moment. "Let her go, Catherine," Nathaniel said. "This is between us." "Oh, but it's not. Is it? It stopped being between us the moment you started digging into the past." Catherine's smile was sharp as a blade. "The moment you found your precious Elena, wandering the streets like the damaged goods she became." Elena stepped forward, and Catherine's expression shifted to one of genuine surprise. Whatever she'd expected, it wasn't the composed woman who now faced her across the warehouse floor. "Hello, Catherine," Elena said calmly. "Did you miss me?" "Impossible. You're supposed to be broken, mindless. The drugs alone should have what? Erased me completely. Made me forget my daughter, my husband, my life." Elena's voice carried 8 years of suppressed rage. "You underestimated me then, and you're underestimating me now." Grace's voice, weak but audible, cut through the tension. "Mom, First Mother, is that really you?" Elena's composure cracked slightly. "I'm here, baby girl. Both your mothers are here." Catherine laughed, the sound echoing harshly off the warehouse walls. "How adorable. The broken woman thinks she can play mother to a child she abandoned." "I didn't abandon her," Elena said, taking another step forward. "I saved her from you. You left her on a stranger's doorstep. I left her with Clare, my best friend from childhood, the only person I trusted completely." Elena's memories were crystallizing as she spoke, the fog of trauma finally lifting. Even drugged, even terrified, some part of me remembered Claire's address. I knew she'd love Grace, protect her, give her the life I couldn't. Daniel's gun was shaking in his hands. "Catherine, we need to finish this and get out of here. The longer we stay." "Shut up." "Daniel." Catherine pulled out her own weapon, a sleek pistol that looked far more familiar in her hands. "You want to know the real joke, Nathaniel? Elena gave birth right here, in this very room, chained to that pipe over there, screaming for help that never came." Elena's face went white, but she didn't falter. "I remember now, all of it. How you poisoned me, how you sold me, how you watched while they tortured me for information about Nathaniel's business accounts. And you never broke," Catherine said with grudging admiration. "Stupid, really? A few passwords would have saved you so much pain. Some things are worth more than comfort." The standoff stretched taut. 3 adults with weapons drawn while an 8-year-old girl fought to stay conscious in her chair. Then Grace's voice, thin but determined, broke the silence. "I know who you are." Catherine turned toward her, confused. "What?" "In my dreams, there's always a scary lady with mean eyes. She hurts my first mother and makes her cry." Grace's blue eyes, so much like Nathaniel's, fixed on Catherine with eerie intensity. "You're the monster from my dreams. Children don't remember things from when they were babies. I remember everything," Grace said simply. "The cold room, the chains, my first mother singing to me even when she was scared. And I remember you, standing in the corner, watching her suffer." Catherine's hand tightened on her gun. "Impossible. Grace has an eidetic memory," Elena said quietly. "It's genetic, runs in Nathaniel's family. She remembers because she was there for all of it, growing inside me, experiencing everything I experienced." The revelation hit Catherine like a physical blow. Her carefully constructed plan, based on the assumption that there were no witnesses to her crimes, crumbled in an instant. "Then she dies tonight," Catherine said, raising her weapon, but she'd forgotten about Daniel, who'd been growing more horrified with each revelation. As Catherine aimed at Grace, he lunged forward, grabbing her arm. "No, not a child, Catherine. I won't be part of killing a child." The gun went off in the struggle. The bullet ricocheting off metal pipes overhead, Elena used the distraction to rush toward Grace while Nathaniel tackled Catherine to the ground. "Get Grace out of here," Nathaniel shouted as he fought for control of Catherine's weapon. But as Elena reached Grace and began untying her restraints, the familiar smell of smoke filled the air. In the chaos of the fight, one of the lanterns had been knocked over, and the old warehouse's dry wood was catching fire with terrifying speed. "The whole place is going up," Elena said, lifting Grace into her arms despite her daughter's protests that she could walk. Daniel had won the struggle for Catherine's gun, but instead of pointing it at anyone, he was running toward a pile of boxes in the corner, the same boxes where he'd hidden 8 years' worth of financial documents and bearer bonds. The money. he screamed over the growing roar of flames. "I'm not losing everything." Catherine, knocked unconscious in her fight with Nathaniel, lay still as smoke began to fill the warehouse. Fire was spreading along the walls, cutting off escape routes with each passing second. "This way," Elena called, her memory of the building's layout, their only hope of survival. As they ran toward the service tunnel, Grace looked back over Elena's shoulder. What about the scary lady? Elena and Nathaniel exchanged glances. Catherine was still unconscious, and the fire was spreading fast. "We can't leave her," Nathaniel said, though every instinct screamed against going back. "You're right," Elena agreed. "We're not murderers, no matter what she did to us." The smoke was getting thicker by the second, turning the warehouse into a hellscape of orange flames and choking darkness. Elena clutched Grace against her chest, following Nathaniel as he dragged Catherine's unconscious form toward what he hoped was still a viable exit. The service tunnels blocked. Elena shouted over the roar of the fire. The ceiling collapsed. Nathaniel looked around desperately. The main entrance was completely engulfed, flames licking at the steel beams overhead with hungry intensity. 8 years ago, Catherine had chosen this warehouse specifically because it had limited exits, easier to control prisoners. Now that same feature was becoming their death trap. "There," Grace pointed weakly toward a loading dock on the east side. "I saw light coming through there when they brought me in." Elena's heart clenched. Even drugged and kidnapped, her 8-year-old daughter was thinking more clearly than the adults. "Can you make it that far, baby girl?" "I think so, but the scary lady is heavy." Nathaniel adjusted his grip on Catherine, who was starting to regain consciousness. "I've got her, Elena. Take Grace and go. I'll be right behind you. We stick together," Elena said firmly. "All of us." As they made their way through the maze of burning debris, Daniel's screams echoed from somewhere behind them. He was still trying to salvage the boxes of financial documents, refusing to accept that his stolen fortune was literally going up in smoke. "Daniel," Catherine called out groggily as awareness returned. "Daniel, where are you?" "He chose the money over his life," Nathaniel said grimly, supporting Catherine's weight as they navigated around a fallen beam. "You don't understand," Catherine gasped, smoke inhalation making her voice raspy. "Those documents, they implicate more than just us. Board members, city officials, federal contractors. If they burn, then a lot of corrupt people get to sleep easier tonight." Elena cut her off. "Not our problem." They reached the loading dock just as the warehouse's central support beam groaned ominously. The structure was failing fast, and they had minutes at most before the entire building came down. The loading dock's metal door was warped from heat, but Nathaniel managed to force it open enough for them to squeeze through. Outside, Marcus and his security team were already rushing toward them, along with fire trucks and ambulances that Elena hadn't even heard arriving. "Over here!" Marcus shouted, directing paramedics toward their location as they stumbled away from the warehouse. A series of explosions rocked the building behind them. Chemical storage tanks, forgotten for years in the basement, were finally succumbing to the heat. The force of the blasts knocked them all to the ground, Grace crying out as Elena shielded her with her body. When the debris stopped falling, they looked back to see the warehouse completely engulfed. If Daniel was still inside, he wasn't coming out. "Grace, baby, are you hurt?" Elena frantically checked her daughter for injuries. "I'm okay, but I can't breathe very well." Grace's lips were definitely blue now, and her breathing was shallow and rapid. "Heart distress from the smoke and stress," one of the paramedics said, immediately placing an oxygen mask over Grace's face. "We need to get her to the hospital now." As they loaded Grace into the ambulance, Catherine finally spoke up from where she sat handcuffed to a gurney. "You saved me." Elena looked at her with a mixture of pity and contempt. "I saved you because my daughter was watching, because I want her to learn that we don't become monsters, even when monsters hurt us." 8 years, Catherine said quietly. 8 years I've been looking over my shoulder, waiting for you to remember, waiting for this moment. And when it came, you saved my life. "Don't mistake mercy for forgiveness," Elena replied. "You stole 8 years from my family. You sold me into hell and made my daughter grow up without her mother. There's no forgiveness for that." At St. Mary's Hospital, Clare was waiting in the emergency department, having been alerted by Marcus. When she saw Elena carrying Grace through the doors, she burst into tears. "Is she? She's going to be okay," Elena said, though her own voice was shaking. But she needs surgery soon. The stress made everything worse. Dr. Chen appeared immediately, taking charge of Grace's care with the efficiency of someone who'd been preparing for this moment. We've been monitoring her condition closely. The smoke inhalation complicated things, but she's stable enough for surgery. Tonight? Nathaniel asked. Within the hour, the surgical team is already prepping. As Grace was wheeled into pre-op, she reached out for both Elena and Clare. Mom, First Mother, will you both be here when I wake up? Wild horses couldn't drag us away, Clare promised. We're not going anywhere, baby girl, Elena added, kissing Grace's forehead. The surgery took 4 hours. Elena, Nathaniel, and Clare maintained a vigil in the surgical waiting room, joined by Marcus and several of Nathaniel's security team. It was the strangest family gathering imaginable. A billionaire real estate mogul, a former homeless woman with severe PTSD, a gas station clerk who'd raised someone else's child for 8 years, and a collection of private investigators and bodyguards. But as they waited, sharing coffee and taking turns pacing, something remarkable happened. Elena began talking about her years on the street, not the trauma, but the small kindnesses she'd encountered. Clare shared stories about Grace's childhood, about first words and lost teeth in school plays. Nathaniel found himself laughing for the first time in years as Clare described Grace's attempt to make him a Father's Day card before she'd even met him. She drew a picture of a sad man in a suit and wrote, "For my maybe daddy" on it, Clare said. I asked her why she thought she had a maybe daddy, and she said everyone has a daddy somewhere, even if they can't find each other. She always believed you existed, Elena told Nathaniel softly. Even when I couldn't remember you. Some part of her carried that certainty. At 3:17 a.m., Dr. Chen emerged from surgery looking exhausted but triumphant. The repair was successful. Grace's heart function should be completely normal within a few weeks. The relief was overwhelming. Elena collapsed into Nathaniel's arms. 8 years of fear and grief finally finding release in tears of joy. Clare hugged them both, and for a moment, the waiting room held a family that had been broken and scattered, and somehow found its way back together. 2 days later, Catherine Carter stood before a federal judge, facing charges of kidnapping, attempted murder, fraud, and human trafficking. The financial documents Daniel had died trying to save had been recovered from the warehouse's fireproof basement vault, providing evidence of a corruption scandal that would make headlines for months. Elena testified via video link from the hospital, her memory now fully restored, and her account devastating in its clarity. The judge set bail at $50 million, money that no longer existed, having been frozen by federal asset forfeiture. Mrs. Carter, the judge said, you'll be held in federal custody pending trial. Given the severity of the charges and your flight risk, bail is denied. As Catherine was led away in shackles, she looked back at the camera where she knew Elena was watching. There was no defiance left, no anger, just the hollow recognition of someone who'd gambled everything and lost. Grace was released from the hospital on a Thursday morning, her recovery faster than anyone had dared hope, as they walked out together. Elena supporting Grace on one side, Clare on the other, with Nathaniel carrying enough flowers to stock a florist shop. Grace made an announcement. I want to keep both my names. What do you mean, sweetheart? Clare asked. Grace Donovan Carter, because I have 2 families now, and both of them love me. Elena and Clare exchanged glances over Grace's head. It was going to be complicated, this new family structure they were building. There would be therapy sessions and legal proceedings and 1,000 small adjustments to navigate. But looking at Grace's smile, bright and genuine for the first time since this ordeal began, Elena knew they'd figure it out. They'd survived the worst that Catherine could throw at them. Everything else was just details. 2 years later, the morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Carter estate, casting golden patterns across the marble floors where Grace sat cross-legged, carefully arranging flower petals in small bowls. At 10 years old, she moved with the confidence of a child who'd never doubted she was loved. Her heart surgery just a faint scar beneath her collarbone, and a story she told with pride rather than fear. Mom, do you think the white roses or the pink ones look better with my dress? Grace called out, holding up 2 different petals. Which mom are you asking? Elena laughed from the kitchen doorway, her voice warm with the kind of joy that had taken 2 years of therapy and patience to fully recover. Both of you. That's why I said Mom loud enough for everyone to hear. Clare emerged from the guest suite. Though calling it a guest suite was largely ceremonial since she'd become a permanent fixture in their lives, she'd kept her own apartment in the city, maintaining her independence while becoming an integral part of their unconventional family structure. Pink, Clare said decisively. It matches the pearls. Grace touched the necklace around her throat. The same Carter family pearls that had started this entire journey. Elena had officially passed them to Grace on her 9th birthday, completing a circle that had been broken for so long. "Are you nervous, sweetheart?" Elena asked, settling beside Grace on the floor, with a grace that would have been impossible during her years on the street. "A little, but good nervous. Like when you're about to go on a really fun roller coaster." Today was Elena and Nathaniel's vow renewal ceremony, a celebration that had been 2 years in the making. The original wedding had been a rushed affair, 2 young people in love but not yet understanding what love really meant. This ceremony would be different, deeper, earned through loss and recovery, and the kind of forgiveness that could only come from truly knowing someone. Nathaniel appeared in the doorway, adjusting his tie with the nervous energy of a man about to marry the love of his life for the 2nd time. At 37, he looked younger than he had in years, the hard edges of grief softened by the daily presence of his family. "The guests are starting to arrive," he announced, "and Marcus wants to know if you're sure about the security arrangements." For the 100th time. "Yes," Elena replied. "No bodyguards during the ceremony. This is about family and love, not about the past." Catherine Carter was serving life without parole at a federal correctional facility in Pennsylvania. Her trial had been swift and decisive, her cooperation in exposing the broader corruption network, earning her nothing more than a slightly more comfortable cell. Daniel Reeves had been posthumously charged with multiple felonies, his death in the warehouse fire closing a chapter that had defined their lives for too long. The estate's garden had been transformed into something magical. White silk drapes fluttered between century-old oak trees, and thousands of fairy lights created a canopy of stars even in the afternoon sun. The guest list was small, just the people who'd been part of their journey back to each other. Dr. Chen was there with her family, having become more than just Grace's cardiologist over the past 2 years. Tom Murphy had closed the gas station for the day, his weathered face beaming with pride as he watched Clare in her maid of honor dress. Marcus Webb stood near the back, still alert and professional, but no longer scanning for threats, just enjoying the celebration of people he'd grown to care about. Brother Michael from the downtown mission sat in the front row, having officiated the ceremony at Elena's special request. The man who'd fed her when she was Ivy, who'd shown kindness without asking questions, would be the one to bless their new beginning. "Places, everyone," Clare called out, her role as unofficial wedding coordinator giving her the authority to move billionaires and private investigators around like chess pieces. Grace took her position as flower girl with the seriousness of someone entrusted with a sacred duty. She'd designed her own flower scattering pattern, incorporating mathematical principles she'd learned from her accelerated tutoring program. Grace's eidetic memory and advanced intellect had led to placement in gifted education programs, though Elena and Nathaniel were careful to ensure she remained a child first and a prodigy second. As the string quartet began playing, Elena appeared at the garden's entrance. She wore a simple but elegant cream-colored dress, her hair falling in soft waves around her shoulders. The years of trauma had left their marks, a faint scar along her jawline, a wariness in her eyes that would probably never fully disappear, but she moved with quiet confidence, a woman who'd survived hell and chosen to build heaven on the other side. Nathaniel's breath caught as she walked toward him. The first time he'd married Elena, he'd been marrying potential, a beautiful young woman he was still getting to know. Today, he was marrying the woman who'd endured the unthinkable and emerged stronger, who'd saved their daughter through sheer force of will, who'd chosen forgiveness over vengeance and love over fear. "Dearly beloved," Brother Michael began, his voice carrying the authority of someone who'd seen both the worst and best of humanity. "We gathered today not just to witness a wedding, but to celebrate the power of love to overcome any obstacle." The ceremony was brief, but profound. Elena and Nathaniel had written their own vows, speaking words that acknowledged their past while embracing their future. "Elena," Nathaniel said, his voice thick with emotion, 8 years ago, I thought I'd lost you forever. I spent those years building walls, thinking that success could fill the hole you'd left behind. But success without you was just expensive loneliness. Today, I promise not just to love you, but to choose you every day. To choose hope over fear, trust over suspicion, and family over everything else. Elena's vows were equally moving. Nathaniel, you never stopped looking for me, even when everyone else said to let go. You found our daughter when I couldn't even remember I had one. You gave me back my life, my memory, and my purpose. I promise to honor that gift by being the wife and mother I was meant to be, and by never taking a single day of this second chance for granted. When Brother Michael pronounced them husband and wife. Again, and Nathaniel kissed Elena with 8 years of longing and 2 years of recovery behind it. There wasn't a dry eye in the garden. The reception was held on the estate's terrace, overlooking the city where their story had unfolded. As the sun set and the fairy lights took over, Grace stood on a chair to make a toast. 2 years ago, I thought I only had one mom, she announced, raising her glass of sparkling cider with theatrical flair. Then I found out I had 2 moms and a dad, which seemed like a lot of parents until I realized that meant I had a lot of people to love me. The adults laughed. But Grace wasn't finished. Some families are born together, and some families find each other. Ours got lost and had to find each other again. But maybe that makes us stronger, because we know how special it is to be together. She paused, looking around at the assembled group. Her unconventional but perfect family. My first mother taught me that love means never giving up, even when everything seems impossible. My second mother taught me that love means choosing to stay, even when things get scary. And my dad taught me that love means building something beautiful from broken pieces. Grace raised her glass higher. To families that find each other, and to second chances, and to love that's stronger than anything bad that tries to break it. As the adults raised their glasses in response, Elena felt tears of joy streaming down her face. The little girl who'd been born in a warehouse, who'd spent her first 3 weeks of life surrounded by trauma and fear, had somehow grown into this wise, loving, remarkable person. Later that evening, as the last guest departed and Grace fell asleep in the garden swing with fairy lights twinkling overhead, Nathaniel and Elena sat together on their terrace, fingers intertwined as they looked out over the city lights. Do you ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't stopped at that gas station? Elena asked softly. Every day, we might have missed each other completely. Grace would have grown up without knowing you. I might have spent the rest of my life as Ivy, never remembering who I really was. Nathaniel squeezed her hand. But we didn't miss each other. Against all odds, we found our way back. Elena leaned against his shoulder, marveling at how safe she felt in his arms, a feeling she'd thought she'd never experience again. Grace is right, you know. Some families are born together, and some families find each other, but the families that have to fight to stay together, that choose each other over and over again, those might be the strongest of all. In the distance, the city sparkled with possibility, full of stories still being written, and families still finding their way to each other. And on the Carter estate terrace, 3 people who'd been separated by cruelty and reunited by love sat together under the stars, finally and completely home. The pearl necklace glowed softly around Grace's neck as she slept, a symbol of heritage and survival, of love that transcends time and trauma. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new joys, new opportunities to choose each other. But tonight, they were exactly where they belonged. Together, safe, and surrounded by the kind of love that makes any sacrifice worthwhile.